Hi everybody, and welcome to Fresh File First Run 101. I'm Pride, and while I'm by no means an expert, I'm going to try and give you all the basic information you'll need to start trying to get your first run clear. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer up front. I've not yet fully beaten first run. I'm on this journey with you, and most of this information is going to come from the experience that I've gleaned from about 220 attempts, or from other runners who are, not me. So I'm going to do my best to give credit where I can, and I will be including further resources in the description. If you're already somewhat familiar with the category, feel free to jump to the next section. Otherwise, we're going to jump in with a quick overview of the Hades leaderboard, Fresh File, and First Run more specifically. If you're completely new to the speedrunning world, first off, welcome. It's important to note that this guide is going to contain spoilers for the game, so if you've not yet completed a run and spoilers are going to bother you, I'd recommend clicking away. The leaderboards for Hades runs can be found at speedrun.com/Hades, that link is on the screen. I'd encourage you to go ahead and pause this video, head over there, and check out the available categories if you are new. First run may not be for you, or it might, so go take a look, and then I'll be here when you get back. To submit a run to speedrun.com, you'll need a video recording of the run hosted somewhere permanent. The most common options for that are Twitch highlights if you stream your runs, or you can upload them here on YouTube. The in-game timer that's found in the settings menu will need to be enabled and has to be visible for the entire run. The only other major rule that you might run afoul of is that God mode is not allowed to be enabled. For other rules, check the game rules listed on the leaderboards. Once your run is submitted, it'll need to be approved by our moderators. This can take up to 3 weeks in extreme circumstances, but in my experience it usually just takes a few days. I won't be getting into general tips for any heat or other categories here. For more general speedrunning information, this guide from Wrist13 is absolutely excellent. The rules specifically for the Fresh File category are fairly simple. First off, you're going to start the run from a brand new game file, and you'll need to show the selection of the new file. Secondly, the run is timed using real time, and time is going to start as soon as the new file is selected. It will end as soon as the final boss dies. Third, any interruptions that are not deaths, such as quitting the game, quitting a run, crashes, or using the give up option in the menu, are not allowed. You'll notice that you're totally allowed to take more than one life to get through the run. In fact, there are a couple of popular multi-run routes, going up to, I believe, 4 runs to the best of my knowledge. I have not attempted any of these multi-run routes, so we also won't be getting into detail on those. If you're interested though, there are text guides for 2 of those runs at speedrun.com/Hades/guides, and those will also be linked in the description. And that'll finally bring us to the subject of this series of guides, First Run. As the name implies, this is a Fresh File route that aims to reach and defeat the final boss in a single run. This is an incredibly difficult endeavor, as you'll have none of the meta progression rewards available in the other categories. This means no Mirror of Night upgrades, so no Death Defiance, only 1 dash, and of course you'll be using the basic level 1 Zagreus Aspect sword. In addition, Hermes will not appear, and no Daedalus hammers are available. At the time of recording, and by my count, the community has 4 runners that have a recorded first run clear on the leaderboard. As I said at the start, after some 220 attempts, I am not among them. So if you're just starting on this journey, I'll be right there with you. With all the category information out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the specifics. The first thing that you're going to need to get comfortable with is the sword combo. This information largely comes from Musaeus' Fresh File sword guide, which is linked in the description. The basic combo that we will eventually be improvising over is this. You're going to do a dash strike, a single attack, a special, and repeat. This is a fast combo that'll deal 100 damage with no boons. Weaving casts into the combo as available will improve that damage by a pretty respectable 50 points every 15 seconds or so, but it's not strictly necessary, and if you find that you're regularly taking damage trying to do it, I'd say don't worry about it, and just get comfortable with the basic combo to start. You're going to get comfortable pretty quickly, but go ahead and take a few minutes with Skelly just to really work it into your muscle memory. Once you're comfortable with the basic combo, there are a few variations that can be particularly helpful in Tartarus. Unarmored witches are going to die to a single cast and a dash strike, or to a dash strike and a special attack with no boons. They will also die to a deflected cast and a dash strike, but that's only available after the first chamber. For unarmored thugs, a single round of cast into dash strike into special into a dash strike is going to get you a kill super quick. Numbskulls, I mean, they're going to die to anything but a basic attack, and louts are just buckets of HP. There's no special combo variation that's going to speed them up. Finally, there are a couple interesting mechanics with the sword special and the dash strike. To do a dash special, input special and then immediately press dash. You're going to see Zagreus dash in the middle of the special animation, and the special will trigger at the end of the dash. It's going to look something like this. This is super useful for approaching crowds of small enemies that might hit stun you and interrupt the base combo. One really good example is a crowd of numbskulls. The second kind of weird mechanic is that you actually have a pretty wide window to input a dash strike following the dash. That's going to look a little something like this. This can be useful to get a little extra reach out of your dash attack if you're unsure that you'll hit with simultaneous dash and attack inputs. Particularly helpful for reaching witches as they're repositioning. Once you're familiar with all these tools, you're going to be in a pretty good position mechanically. You'll naturally see situations that require you to improvise over these combos, so do make sure that you're comfortable running through them with Skelly, and then get in there and practice on live enemies. There is actually one final mechanic to note. Since you only have one dash, the dash cooldown timer is a lot more important in first run. Musaeus' guide goes into specifics on what rhythm you can hit to get the most dashes out in the shortest amount of time, and it's going to be important for you to go through and actually practice doing that. In every run, the hallway to the first chamber offers a really good opportunity to practice it, so once you've used Musaeus' guide, practice the rhythm a little bit. Make sure that you are practicing getting to the door as fast as possible. It's not going to make a big difference early on, but there are attacks that the later bosses can do where it can become very helpful to have that timing down pat. Hades' spin attack, for instance, actually has enough time for you to dash twice with perfect rhythm. So even though this won't be much of a factor early on, do go ahead and start drilling it in now. Another useful thing to note is that the first chamber, the Athena room, is exactly the same every run. There are some variations in spawn timing and in what order the enemies spawn, but the waves will always have the same composition each time. This room then is something that you can fully optimize, since you're going to go through it hundreds of times, and it also offers a really good way to practice the thug and witch variations on the base combo. The footage that you're about to see comes from Wrist, who is kind enough to provide a sample clip from an objectively better player than me. While you're watching, do take note of his routing through the room. You'll notice that he always moves in such a way as to be close to the exit by the time he's cleared his enemies. And also check out the way that he uses spacing to make sure that when possible, he's hitting more than one enemy at once.
Not a chance. It's got to be.
Hail, noble.
I know you can't hear me all the way where you are, goddess.
Alright, now for some build information. There's really only one build that we go for on first run, the Blessed Merciful End. We'll get into some tips and tricks to get to it, but at its most basic, this is going to be Ares attack, Athena special, Athena dash, you're going to pick up Impending Doom from Ares, and of course you need to have Merciful End. Your cast isn't going to matter too much, though I would recommend against taking Slicing Shot from Ares. That's going to open up a couple extra Ares boons that can make it harder to find what you need from him. Artemis and Athena are both good choices here, but you're definitely going to want to prioritize the cast lower than your core ME boons. Other useful boons can include pressure points for the chance to crit on Doom procs and everything else. This can be a nice DPS increase. Hunter's Mark, though this is really only useful after having a crit boon from Artemis, it can speed up your room clear pretty respectably. From Dionysus, there are only actually 3 boons that I found helpful. Those are Premium Vintage, for a bit of extra health, Positive Outlook, for just a little extra touch of survivability, and After Party, exclusively when those first 2 don't show up. It's important to note that you cannot see Strong Drink in the first run, as it's gated behind the House Contractor upgrade that unlocks in-biome fountain rooms. Since the first chamber is always going to be an Athena reward with her attack, cast, and dash offered, you will always start with Athena Dash. This is unfortunately not a prerequisite for Merciful End, but it is a key part of how you'll use it when you have it, so always start with the dash. First run actually has a couple extra limitations present that make it easier than you would expect to get Merciful End online. The first of these is that there are only 4 gods that you can even see on your first run. Those are Athena, Ares, Artemis, and Dionysus. The second is kind of hidden, but incredibly useful. You will never see a god offered in Charon's shops that you have not spoken to. This means that if you only have Athena and Ares boons, you're only going to be able to buy boons from them, and therefore you're naturally going to want to avoid Artemis and Dionysus as long as possible, at least until you have Merciful End. The last consideration is that you just don't want to open up any other duo boons or legendary boons until you have Merciful End. Legendary boons share a rarity slot with duos, so they compete for availability. The boons to avoid then are 1. Brilliant Riposte, which unlocks Athena's legendary, and 2. Artemis Cast, which will unlock Athena and Artemis's duo boon. Both of these are only going to compete with getting Emmy from Athena, they don't affect the chance of receiving it from Ares. You can high roll and try only to get Emmy from Ares then, but I personally prefer to play it safe and just not unlock Deadly Reversal or Divine Protection.
Leave it to the god of wine to liven things up around here.
There are a couple big differences in the decision-making process for first run when compared to other categories. The first of these is that skipping mid-shop is going to be a much more necessary consideration in first run. Because of the shop pool mechanic, you'll often see the mid-shop offered opposite a room with an Ares boon reward, especially in Tartarus. If you don't already have Ares in your god pool, you're pretty much going to have to take the Ares room. This is mitigated by the fact that you generally won't have a lot of cash on hand in the Tartarus mid-shop, but other interesting cases can also arise. For instance, you might occasionally want to take a guaranteed Athena or Ares room over the mid-shop in Elysium if you don't have Merciful End and you've been forced to take Artemis and Dionysus boons, since in that case you're only going to have a 50% chance of seeing the gods you want in the shop and a 100% chance in the opposite room. The second major difference is that mini-bosses are a lot more threatening in first run. You're not going to have the damage output to melt mini-bosses like the Butterfly Ball or the Power Couple, so it can, in some cases, be helpful to skip the mini-boss if they're offered against an Ares or Athena reward, or a Centaur Heart if you're particularly low on max health. Finally, max health is just a lot more important in first run. I like to have as close to 200 to 250 as I can by the Hades fight, though your mileage might vary. Regardless, you're going to want to prioritize Centaur Hearts just a bit higher than you're used to if you run other categories. Alright, the next 2 things aren't really super important, but I kind of find them interesting and just wanted to throw them in here. The first is that most free rooms are not available. You're not going to see any fountain rooms except for the one between biomes, as those are gated behind a House Contractor upgrade. Story rooms and Chaos Gates also just aren't going to show up. Food rewards are something that exists in first run that you really won't see again after. In certain tiles in Asphodel, the game can roll a story room exit, but since those are locked, it's going to fall back to being a food room instead. This is fairly uncommon, so it's not something that you can rely on by any means, but it is incredibly useful when it happens to get some free healing in. Alright, we did it. That's all the information I could think of to put in this basics guide. There is a link to Musaeus' guide on screen and in the description. It'll go into more detail on the multi-run routes available in Freshfile as well. I've also included links to the Twitch channels of a couple runners that are either on the leaderboards with a completed first run, or are trying to get on the board at the time of this recording. I'm planning to put together some in-depth biome guides over the next several weeks, although I will note that I am waiting on making the Hades guide until I get to the point that I can beat him pretty regularly. For any additional help, we have a super welcoming Discord server. That's linked at the speedrun.com page for Hades. I'm not sure that I'm allowed to link it here, so just go to speedrun.com and there's a Discord link there. If you have any questions or corrections, please do comment below, and make sure to subscribe to catch the upcoming guides. Thanks guys, and good luck on your runs.